Advertising, much like it always has been, except for the little blip in the internet where it was free for about a decade, has now moved to a paid type medium on what you have to look at. So we look at earnings reports because what we're trying to identify are what are the top platforms that we should be having our clients message on.
The following marketing information and discussion is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as professional guidance or consultancy. Just enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to The Buyer's Journey by Comexis, a discussion-based podcast focused on gaining your business a competitive advantage by eliminating marketing confusion and making your digital marketing work for you. I'm Matthew McGordy, the social media content producer here at Comexis.
I am Len Ward, the managing partner at Comexis.
So on today's show, it is earnings week, or month, I guess. For us, it's earnings week, because that's what we're focusing on today on the show. We are focusing on some of the big platforms and their earnings reports that have come out throughout October and in the beginning of November. And you might be wondering, why are we so focused on these earnings reports? Why do we talk about them every quarter when they come out? Why do we dedicate, in this case, one huge episode to them? In the past, why have we dedicated an episode for each of them? Len, can you talk about the importance of earnings reports and why we care so much about them and what they say?
So the earnings reports are really important to Comexis and how we construct a campaign because, our process here is we try to get clients to a 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio. And one of the ways we do it, there's a million different ways in which the roads all lead ultimately to that profit, is truly understanding that the days of organic and the days of free and the days of viral, while still around, do not have the impact they used to have. So you really have to dig into, okay, well, if you're telling me that I can't really, the internet, quote unquote, is not free and SEO is pulling back and I can't do a really cool social media post, although you can do all that stuff, it just doesn't have the impact anymore. And the reason it doesn't have the impact anymore is because these companies are publicly traded companies and they're trying to make money. And you have to understand as we go through these sections, when you have when you have companies coming in with like $30 billion in earnings a quarter, I think that's Google, I have to look at this next, and of that, $34 billion in earnings, and of that $30 billion comes in at advertising, you understand that Google, Facebook, the likes are making more and more money off their paid platforms. So we're getting clients to try to understand and embrace that. We created an internal algorithm, I won't get too deep into our algorithm, where we identify certain things that we're looking for within the paid platforms for us to say, okay, from a weighted campaign, based upon what industry you're in, we feel as if these platforms are where you should be. This is the weight allocation of where your ad dollars should be. And again, that's all predicated based on things we're looking at within the earnings, which we can kind of talk about now.
Absolutely. So the first earnings report we're going to focus on today is the Facebook earnings report. A lot of this information is coming from Salvador Rodriguez on CNBC. Here are the key numbers for Q3 2019, which ended on September 30th. For earnings, it was $2.12 versus $1.91 per share forecasted by Refinitiv. The revenue was $17.65 billion versus the $17.37 billion forecast also by Refinitiv. Daily active users were slightly increased, 1.62 billion versus 1.61 billion, again forecasted, in this case forecasted by FactSet. Monthly active users were about 2.4 billion versus 2.4 billion, forecasted by FactSet. And the average revenue per user increased to $7.26 versus $7.09, which is the forecast by FactSet. Facebook reported revenue growth of 29% from a year earlier, marking the third straight quarter of sub 30% expansion. Here's a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. We had a good quarter and our community and business continue to grow. We are focused on making progress on major social issues and building new experiences that improve people's lives around the world. Let's start with that. What do we think about that, Len?
So I think it's funny because I've actually quoting, and I thought the revenue was a little higher than what it is here. So anybody who was in a meeting with recently, sorry, it wasn't 23 billion or 17 billion. I almost got that mixed up. I think the number one stat I'm pulling from all of this is that this is now the third straight quarter of nearly 30% growth. So again, that goes directly into the point where you may be at a company and you're very focused on your organic calendar content calendar for Facebook. That's great, but it falls back into only 5% of people actually ever see your Facebook post. So you are going to have to put some money behind those great content posts you're looking to do. And companies that are doing that are now actually helping Facebook grow close to 30% revenue. That is one of the telltale signs we're looking for. One of the very first things we look for is a company's revenue growing at least 2 quarters to 3 quarters, 15+% revenue growth is one thing we're looking for. And if you're not growing at that, it doesn't mean we won't use the platform. It just means it's how heavily we're weighted on having ad dollars in there. Facebook is killing it. I don't really think this is something we have to go too deep in. The only thing I've had a little concern with, we've been testing lately, is I'm beginning to question Facebook in the B2B realm for the awareness stage. I know we've been running it for a couple companies right now, and as it stands right now, we have considered maybe moving, if you're a B2B company, we have considered moving some dollars out of Facebook from the awareness stage over to some Google properties. We'll get into that later. But outside of that, Facebook is tremendous. Facebook, if you have an advertising campaign right now, you should at least have roughly 30% of your ad dollars allocated to Facebook right now, spread across the awareness, consideration, purchase stage. It's clear that Facebook and Google are breaking away. So that's just my initial thought process on it. The number one number, again, to look at is 29% growth from last year is staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. And giving a little foreshadowing or a little spoiling, Facebook is probably one of the only companies outside of two that come to mind that in this quarter have seen some really significant success and continuous growth. So they're definitely still keeping strong. Their monthly active users seem to have plateaued, as we've talked about in the past on previous Facebook earnings reports. At this point, there's only so many people you can have on the platform at once. So the fact that they're stagnating or even seeing slight increases in daily active users, for example, is a good sign that they've kind of hit that plateau, as long as we're not seeing any incredible downturns outside of the chance that maybe they're removing bots or something like that and they're reporting that, then that means we're pretty steady there. One thing to keep in mind is that they also mentioned some decelerating fourth quarter sales growth, but that growth seems to be forecasted to slow down to only 24%, which is about a 5% slowdown, but 24% of growth, still pretty good.
Still pretty good.
Still pretty good.
I actually don't agree with that. Really? I think it's wrong. Because it's funny, because we just started noticing that pharmaceutical companies are now advertising on Facebook, which is a huge break. I don't know if anybody knows. Nobody spends like the pharmaceutical industry. They historically do not spend a lot of money in the digital space because of a lot of regulations that they have to get over. I was really surprised to see 2 drugs running. They're really doing bad targeting, by the way, because these drugs do not affect me in any way, shape, or form that I know of. But I said, wow, now the pharmaceutical industry is starting to get in there. I don't think Facebook has truly hit the afterburners on all the people that actually can advertise in there. That's why I think if you're a small to medium-sized business, now is the time to get your ad dollars in Facebook, because I do think this is going to get very cost prohibitive in the next 2 to 3 years. So their revenue growth coming down a little bit, maybe you have a hiccup here and there. And no, I don't see a sustained growth, 30, 40, 50%, but I do see them kind of trailing or hitting that 30% quarter after quarter for quite some time. And you may have a pullback here, a little bit of an acceleration there, but analysts who think the revenue is going to pull back, in my personal opinion, I don't think that's accurate.
So there's also some mobile ad revenue. This is an interesting stat. Mobile ad revenue now accounts for 94% of total ad sales, up from 92% a year earlier. The company said average revenue per user increased 19%, as I mentioned earlier, to $7.26 from $6.09 just a year prior. In addition, I just want to mention this because it's relevant to sort of the big Facebook ad and Twitter ad conversation that's going on, which is that in the report, Zuckerberg also was defending Facebook's decision to continue running some political ads, regardless of whether or not they may have included false information. This comes because Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey also announced earlier that his social network was going to be banning political ads. So there's kind of this thing of, well, should Facebook be running them at all? Zuckerberg points out, here's a quote, "Some people accuse of us allowing the speech because they think all we care about is making money, and that's wrong," Zuckerberg said. He said ads from politicians will account for less than 0.5% of revenue next year.
Zuckerberg is wrong because Wall Street's here to make money.
I also think it's a case of kind of missing the point. at the end of the day, even if you're only making 0.5% of revenue from political ads, you're still making money from them. And if you are saying that's not that much money, well, then why don't you just ban them?
Just
because
ban
you're
them.
not making that much. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I am all for. I know that. I think what Jack Dorsey did, I thought took a lot of balls.
Yeah.
It's clearly hit his stock. It's clearly going to hit his revenue. I think you're going to get some companies that are going to step up and say we're going to double our spend in Twitter because we like what Twitter did. I'm just wondering when that's going to happen. But I think, not to get on a platform, it's not whether you're Democrat or Republican. It's you need to have a free and clear election and not be manipulated by outside sources. And I think a lot of us like to maybe go to Facebook or Twitter, you would think, to kind of have a bit of a relief from constant bickering and complaining that we can't even turn the news on or do anything without hearing it. I would like to see Facebook not do political advertising. It's not going to happen. Hopefully they'll be a little more stringent with it. But I think, again, to me, and I would be stunned if it only made up 0.5%. I'd find that number actually wrong.
well, we don't even know. We don't know the specifics of that number because that could just be politicians buying the ads.
Yeah.
But there's tons of different organizations that buy political ads
For affiliates and
people,
stuff
et cetera,
like
et
that.
cetera.
So
I can't speak to that, but I could see them not including that.
Yeah,
number.
I just think for this presidential election, I think it will be really, really good for the country just to step back and say, you know what, we're not letting any political ad run. But it's not going to happen because they got to make their earnings numbers.
It's true. So now we're moving on to Alphabet and Google's earning reports. A lot of this information is coming from Jennifer Elias on CNBC. Again, all of these will be linked in the podcast description or in our blog post. So here are kind of the key stats. Earnings per share was $10.12 versus $12.42 per share expected per Refinitive's consensus estimates. Revenue was $40.5 billion versus $40.32 billion expected, again per Refinitiv. And the traffic acquisition costs were $7.49 billion versus $7.48 billion, according to FactSet. The company met expectations on traffic acquisition costs. That is, traffic acquisition costs are basically how much they pay other companies to make them the leading browser on phones. So they pay Apple to make sure that Google is the default browser on that device, for example, though I'm pretty sure Safari is the default browser there. Maybe the default search engine. But again, that's basically what that number means. But it seems like their revenue is certainly up. Google advertising revenue, in particular, hit $33.92 billion in Q3 compared to $28.95 billion in quarter three of 2018. And advertising still makes up the vast majority of Alphabet's revenues. Pichai said that half of advertiser search spend is now from automated billing. And Google's other revenue includes Pixel phones, cloud products. That came to about $6.43 billion. So about, what is that? Maybe a quarter of the advertising budget.
I don't even know why it's mentioned.
So a significant portion came from their advertising revenue. We get a nice little chart on CNBC of the growth of that advertising revenue as well. What do we think about this?
This falls into the same line of Facebook. Again, it comes back to, this couples with the report that came out this quarter with Rand Fiskin at Spark Toro and quite a few people talking about, I think it was Jumpstart, whoever came out with the right data set that was, 50% of all Google clicks are not even clickable, meaning somebody searches something on Google, they don't even click anything. 12% of that, people actually end up going to Google properties. Another 8% actually go to Google pay-per-click. Which in a really rough way, you are down to basically 30% of potential traffic you can get on search engine optimization. Anybody who's been in SEO for the last decade, anybody who's been in SEO for the last couple of years realizes that SEO has absolutely hit the mountain. It is only on its way back from now. Look at your SEO traffic right now. Even if you're having a great SEO campaign, if you are properly investing in your campaign the right way, which means you're allocating dollars properly to Facebook paid, properly to pay-per-click on Google, even Bing, display properties, your search engine optimization traffic is going to start pulling back from this point forward. That's if you're properly weighted on the campaign. It's with the size of the jumps they have, it's clear when we sit down and talk to clients that you need to seriously consider having roughly 50% of all of your ad dollars in Google now. I'm even talking traditional. It doesn't make a difference. 50% of your advertising budget, period, needs to be on Google and their properties, which again is YouTube and various other things. Ways you can go all the way down the hole with it. But it's amazing the growth in advertising, and I cannot emphasize enough. You have to engage in a paid campaign on Google to succeed. The longer you hold off from doing this, the longer you try to not understand the actual amount you have to invest in Google, the more ground your competitors are going to not only be gaining on you, but separating from you. The numbers are just right there. The days of doing free stuff on Google are really, really over. And you could say, well, I just have a map listing, or that's all I'm looking to do. Well, you can do pay-per-click and a map. I can go all the way down.
Yeah.
I've had a million podcasts where I've talked about this. I think this just reinforces what we've talked about. At Comexis, we are firm believers that you have to have a lot of your marketing dollars in paid platforms, namely the first two we just talked about. So not much more to say after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to go along with what you were saying, if you aren't taking part in a paid campaign, what you're basically saying is you're going to ride the SEO wave. Which, if you're only going with a paid if you're not going with a paid campaign, there's a chance you're not going with an SEO campaign either. Which means you're basically just riding the wave of the Google algorithm and whatever it decides to do. And they make changes to the Google algorithm constantly. But some of the bigger ones have even more dramatic effects. So if you're not paying attention to that, if you're not trying to SEO even a little bit to make sure that you're matching that, if you're not doing a Google paid campaign, you're just passively letting Google do whatever it wants with your website. And more than likely, you're going to be losing out on some rankings. You're going to be losing out on customers and clients and money coming in your door because you're not taking an active role in saying, all right, I need to do this Google paid campaign because at minimum, this will hopefully make sure that I am seen at the top or towards the top of these searches, and these searches are important for my marketing because this is how people are going to find me. And I think it's really important to make sure that you're taking an active role, because if you passively let Google do whatever it wants, if you let any of these platforms passively do whatever they want, they're going to bury you for people who are paying
we're not
to
spending the money. We've reached a point where on Google, you actually have to start thinking about a pay-per-click campaign for a non-clickable asset. So you may actually answer a question, pay-per-click it, and the individual is never going to click your ad. Now, you're necessarily never going to be charged, although I'm sure Google's going to game this and say, all right, well, now it's cost per impression. But yeah, I think it's really understanding the entire ecosystem of how Google works, why algorithms happen. And again, we've said it before. Well, they're doing an algorithm update for quality search results. Yes, and also to make sure that we have a consistent earnings, growth every single quarter. I told you, anytime that there's a little hiccups in their paid search or any hiccups in their advertising platforms or a little bit of bad news where people are like, I'm not going to put my money on Google anymore. I want to pull back some ad dollars. Bam, here comes, an algorithm update, which shows you how many people are reliant on search engine optimization to actually get their brand's message out there. And it shows you how much you're at the mercy of Google, where if you're just running that, once they hit it, you've got to be ready for a paid campaign. This is its own podcast. It's its own thing, but it's amazing. It's Google and what you need to do right now is amazing. And if you're not actively involved in an in-depth paid campaign across all Google properties, do it. Because your competition's coming now for it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to move on to the Twitter earnings report. This is from Sarah Salinas on CNBC. Here are some of the key numbers from Refinitiv. Earnings per share was 17 cents versus 20 cents expected. The revenue was $823.7 million versus the $874 million expected. And the monetizable daily active users were at 145 million. The company, as Salinas writes, cited a number of headwinds in its revenue shortfall, including product issues and lower than expected advertising in July and August. Here's a little quote. In quarter three, we discovered and took steps to remediate bugs that primarily affected our legacy mobile application promotion MAP product, impacting our ability to target ads and share data with measurement and ad partners, the company said in its shareholder letter. We believe that in aggregate, these issues reduced year-over-year revenue growth by 3 or more points in quarter three. Advertising revenue for the quarter came in at $702 million, which is 8% higher than a year earlier, but significantly lower than the $756 million in ad revenue that analysts surveyed by FactSet had predicted. In addition, total ad engagements increased 23% year over year, and cost per engagement dropped 12%. So engagements increased, and the cost of ads themselves and the cost per those engagements went down, in essence. Len, what do we think about this?
It's funny because if you look at Facebook and if you look at Google, you're not really concerned with user growth. You're not really concerned with a lot of the similar things you're concerned with, or user growth, or the actual size of the audience. Like we've all agreed, we've hit a plateau with Facebook. You pretty much hit a plateau with Google. You pretty much have everybody. Where Twitter, and so you're now on Facebook and Google, you're more looking for time on site. Are they increasing market share?
Is the revenue per user increasing?
Exactly. So those are the things that we're factoring in to say, okay, this is where we want to have our campaign dollars weighted based upon the industry you're in. Twitter's a bit of a different animal. Twitter is, yes, I'm concerned about time on site, screen time per se. Yes, I'm concerned about market share. But the thing I'm really concerned about with Twitter is they're just not increasing their users. And they can say they're bug, and they can say this, and they can say that. Oh, well, this is why we fell short. You fell short because you don't have enough people on the platform. So if you're only at 145 million monetized daily active users, that's barely half the population in America right now. I think we're maybe it's a little more than half. But it's just not enough.
I think America's at 303.
So we're close. So it's half the people in America.
Give me 1 second. United States population. We're looking at 327 million. So about a little less than half.
Less than half. That's their biggest problem. So when I'm looking at this from an advertising perspective, like when I come in and I look at their earnings reports and they're telling me, okay, well, we had a blip here, we're looking for some stuff there, they're not identifying their core problem, which again comes down to, I need to get more people on your site. I need you to have consistently more ad revenue growth. I need your ad revenue growth to be consistently higher than, say, 15%, which it's not, right? What was their ad revenue growth? I guess
it was 8% higher than the year prior.
But
you're like $54 million less than expected.
That's a problem, and that's the core issue. So when I look at it and I look at clients, you have, and we do believe you should be in Twitter. The way we like to look at Twitter is about 5% for Twitter, and I'd like to go a little more than that, but there's just not enough people. It's a very clicky type platform, and it's a platform that doesn't have the best, let's call it the best reputation, but the traffic that does come from Twitter to your website is some of the best traffic you will ever get out there. They are quality, they are conversion driven, and they're users you want to be actively engaged with. But I do have a genuine problem with Twitter, and right now I'm it's funny because the last quarter I was kind of excited about it. I was like, maybe we should move up the weightings a little bit more, where now I'm like, they're just not growing the users, and they're not saying, hey, we have a plan to grow users, and this is what we're going to do because we're trying to get more ad dollars. Because advertisers are sitting here saying, you're not even close to what Facebook and Google is, which is in the billion. Mm-hmm. You're at 145, so how much ad dollars am I supposed to give you?
And that's even, they argue that the monetizable daily active users is a more accurate metric, and it probably is in terms of how many people they can actually advertise to compared to just regular daily active users, which is any user regardless of whether or not they can be advertised to.
Yep.
However, if I compared it to Facebook from a proportional degree, like I'm sure Facebook proportionally is still absolutely killing Twitter in comparison anyway. There was one particular bug I want to mention because we talked about in another podcast a really bad Twitter bug that they caught. There must have been like 5 Twitter bugs because I learned about 4 of them from this article, and then we also had the one about the 2-factor authentication and the phone number targeting. So in this one, a new user to Twitter was asked whether the platform could use the device-specific settings to personalize the user's timeline. The platform collected that data even when the user responded no to the prompt. The company realized the improper use of user data and shut off the feature entirely, limiting its ability to target and sell ads. So while I completely agree with you, Len, that at the end of the day, they just need to get more people to the site. It also sounds like they had like 7 different advertising issues in like did. 1 quarter.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. So they need to fix that, and they also need to grow their platform very clearly. All right, on to Snap's earning report. So we have a loss per share, 4 cents versus 5 cents, forecasted by Refinitiv. We have revenue, $446 million versus $435.1 million, again, forecasted by Refinitiv. Global daily active users, 210 million versus 207 million, forecasted by FactSet. And the average revenue per user was $2.12 versus the $2.10 forecast by FactSet. Snap also says that revenue in the fourth quarter is expected to be between 540 million to 560 million, which is a disappointment relative to the expected sales of 555.4 million, according to Refinitiv. At the midpoint of its guidance range, sales in the fourth quarter would climb 41% from a year earlier. That's for next quarter, however. The reason they're bringing this up is that they are expecting to have a light forecast for the fourth quarter because of the way that the calendar year... Here's a quote. The way the calendar falls this year, there's one fewer week of activity between those two holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Anderson told analysts that's a potential headwind for us, and the guide reflects that. And then again, Snap's user base grew to 210 million daily active user, which was the third quarter in a row of growth for the company, which saw its user base shrink from the first quarter through the third quarter of last year.
They are right. There is 6 rough days, I think, in between, the holidays, and that is going to hurt. I think that's something to consider. I think the smart investors are going to factor that in. Look, I think Snapchat, if you are, we've already said this, if you're B2C, if your marketplace is, if you're trying to be, influence 13 to, 20-something-year-olds, Snapchat's a great thing. I don't really think Snapchat is a good platform for quite a few industries out there. But the thing you got to remember with Snapchat is that you want to start maybe allocating a couple dollars towards there, because the audience that has historically sat on Snapchat is now beginning to grow into your buyer's audience. It's funny, I was at a meeting yesterday and I said, well, we'll never ever allocate your dollars to Snapchat. And the client goes, well, that's good. I'd like to hear that. I said, yet. I was like, because you got to understand, your buyers are not far off. They're only a couple years off from actually, where you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to drop some awareness stuff and retargeting stuff on Facebook because I know my buyer's there. Well, the buyer who actually has the credit card, or the buyer who's in control of purchasing and leasing at a company, they're just starting to emerge on Snapchat. So Snapchat's one of those ones where you kind of look at it in the horizon, and I say to myself, from an advertising standpoint, if you're B2C, and that's your demographic, and age group, obviously, I would absolutely say, let's put a little bit of money there. 3%, 5%, right around there. But it's something I think in a couple years that's only going to slowly grow and grow. And I think more advertisers are going to come in. So it's the kind of thing where if you're a client now, you test it out. Now they're really pushing, by the way, their whole self-service platform.
Yeah,
they're pushing it hard. Apparently, I think Jim here was saying he kind of looked around. It's fairly easy to use.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Did you? Okay, so it's one of those ones where you look at it. But if a client came to me, he's like, okay, well, I got a product to sell, and blah blah blah. What do you think? And I need the best allocation of my money. I'm not spending any more than 5% on Snapchat right now. It's just not there. So, but all in all, I just think it's a matter of time before they're bought.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I don't know who buys them, but somebody buys them.
I thought a really interesting point. So all this information is from Salvador Rodriguez on CNBC. I forgot to mention that before I went through the numbers. But something Rodriguez points out, which is really interesting, is that Evan Spiegel, the CEO of Snap, was asked about the video sharing app TikTok that some of you may or may not be familiar with, and whether or not they consider them a true competitor or not. And Spiegel basically said that the company is a Snap developer partner, so of course he's not going to badmouth them, and an advertiser. And he says that they serve different roles for social media users. Quote, the value they provide their community is very different than the value we provide ours to really empower communications with real friends, Spiegel told analysts. We're excited to continue deepening that partnership and continue working together. I agree with Spiegel. I think they are completely different platforms that only seem similar on the surface.
I don't like to ball up everything because I'm of the belief that every Chinese person and Chinese company is not out to get us. And I think people are just over here making money, and they're over there making money. But I do have a genuine concern about the company that is behind TikTok that developed it. And I think that there's quite a few people that have looked at it, and there's some little murmurs about what are they harvesting, what kind of data are they harvisting.
What company is it, do you know?
That I don't know, but you can pull it up.
ByteDance
is the main company, and it's a company again that's they're headquartered in Beijing. Look, there's no definitive proof that this is what they're doing, but if I'm sitting there looking at it, again, I don't even think TikTok's on the radar for moving ad dollars into right now.
They're just, from what I've heard, there's beginnings. Like I know TikTok does do advertising, but I've heard like the beginnings of people. But we're talking about like Snapchat 5 years ago, where it's like it's really the beginning of it.
Well, you know what though? If you're on the right, again, if you're at that Snapchat audience size, maybe it's something you test out and go with. But Am I turning around and pushing 50% in? Maybe there's the company that pushed 50% in on Facebook 5 years ago and they're killing it. Me right now, though, again, client comes to us, what do you think? How much would you allocate to TikTok? 0 right now. That's just my personal preference. I have no data on them whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that is fair. Will be interesting in keeping an eye on sort of how they grow and develop. But I think Spiegel's answer was good. I really do think the platforms serve completely different purposes, and people are just surface level comparing them, which I don't think is useful at all. So next is Amazon's earning report. This is a lot of information from this is from Eugene Kim on CNBC. So we have the EPS was $4.23 versus $4.62 according to analysts surveyed by Refinitiv. Revenue was $70 billion versus $68.8 billion according to analysts again surveyed by Refinitiv. And Amazon Web Services was $9 billion versus $9.1 billion according to analysts again. In this case surveyed by FactSet. Revenue grew for Amazon 24% to $70 billion for the quarter, showing the heavy investment in free one-day shipping is leading to more purchases. Amazon spent over $800 million in each of the last 2 quarters to expand its free one-day delivery program to more products and regions, and said it is expected to spend $1.5 billion more on the initiative during the 4th quarter to expand its warehouse footprint and product selection. It also pointed to increased spending on the growing cloud business and bolstering its advertising sales force. Here's a quote: "Customers are buying more often, and they're buying more products," Amazon CFO Brian Olofsky said during a call with reporters. What a simple, beautiful quote.
Thanks, Brian.
However, Amazon's 4th quarter revenue guidance came in at $80 billion to $86.5 billion, far below the street's average estimate of $87.4 billion, indicating the all-important holiday shopping season may be underwhelming. The return to a heavy investment cycle is cutting to Amazon's profitability. The net income dropped to $2.1 billion, down 26% from the year ago's period of $2.9 billion. And for the 4th quarter, Amazon is forecasting operating income to fall between $1.2 billion and $2.9 billion, also below $4.2 billion estimate by analysts. What do you think, Glenn?
They're coming back, and people are. Again, remember how we're looking at this. We're looking at these reports where we're not looking at impressions, we're not looking for click-throughs, we're not looking at what's the ad frequency. We're trying to dig deep into the numbers and trying to look at the numbers and how does that compare with clients, and them advertising. So revenue, forecast of revenue and things like that is something that we have to look at to say, okay, well, how will that impact how we, move our ad dollars around? To me, it's, I know this is another one coming back saying they're worried about the all-important ad season and the revenue may come down. So if one of the factors in your algorithm to say where I need to be from an investment standpoint for, my ad dollars, is that something I should really focus on? Well, not really. It is 6 days less. Let's see what happens. But that kind of minutia data, you don't really need to work into as you're looking at this for ad dollars. It's clear that Amazon has become a major, major thorn in the side of Google when it comes to product search. Obviously, they've pushed away eBay to almost nothing. If you're an e-com company, if you're a company with products, Amazon is something where you need to clearly be. There's an entire Amazon platform in which you can have your ad dollars on. Now, we don't work a whole lot with e-com companies and companies with products, but when we do, the very first thing we recommend is identifying an Amazon-only agency that can come in and partner with us and help out, because we do understand the power of it. But with that all being said, I'm not putting 100% of my ad dollars there. So for Amazon, you would have to have kind of like a mix, because if you're selling a product, you can actually sell products very effectively on Instagram right now. There's still a huge market for pay-per-click. Yes, you can still do a little bit of business on eBay. So it's kind of like where you need to be. Where it's at, where you need to be from a weight standpoint. We've never really sat down and given a weight to Amazon and where it is.
Well, I think it's tough on one hand because you have to be e-commerce focused, and some of their advertising is, for example, like the mobile video ads that they were testing out probably like 6 months ago, if I recall. You had to be Sony levels of advertising to be able to hit that. Not to mention, when we talk about Amazon's ad revenue, they always pack it in this other category, which could have a bunch of other things in it. So we don't even have a consistent number of what their ad revenue is from quarter to quarter. So like, for example, I had to go into their report to try and find what their other category was. And from what I can see, it looks like it's about 3.5 to 3.6, I believe that is billion dollars. But we have no idea if that was all ad revenue, if that's ad revenue and something else. It's clearly increased, but we don't know if that was from advertising revenue, et cetera. So I think it's difficult to tell because Amazon isn't giving us the numbers that we need to be able to properly.
Yeah, because you're carving out a part of their business that you have to really kind of focus on, much like we'll kind of look at the Microsoft numbers. But as it stands right now, digital ad revenue share by company in 2019, according to eMarketer, eMarketer's Google at 37.7%. They have Facebook at 23.2%. Those numbers obviously have changed since the latest earnings season. And we're just going to go right up to the next big one, which is Amazon at 7.6%. So the question is, you have to go in and look at all these platforms. And by the way, there's about 20 other platforms in which you could look at and say to yourself, all right, well, okay, so does it pass the mustard per se? Is the user growth growing at Amazon? Yes, it is. What is their market share when it comes to online buying? Dominant.
Yeah.
That's the term I would use.
Number one probably is what I would say.
Is there, did I mention, but is their user growth growing? Probably. I think it's one in, I read somewhere every single person in our country has either bought something off Amazon or has gotten a gift from Amazon. So you've probably hit that point. So, what's their revenue growth? Clearly they're growing at a really good clip. So, and there's about 10 other metrics you can factor in. So when you boil all of that in, you would say to yourself, all right, well, just by me looking at this, I'm going to say that if I'm an e-commerce company or I'm selling a product, and if Amazon takes my product, I'm going to be at the bare minimum 30% of my weighted budget on Amazon, and then I'm going to disperse the other dollars heavily towards Google, eBay, Instagram, Facebook for actual purchasing. But so that's kind of where it is. That's kind of off the cuff. We've done it. Again, we don't really do a lot of products. We don't really do a lot of e-commerce, although I do have an e-commerce background. But that's kind of where we are. But we do like to look at Amazon regarding advertising, because I do think somewhere down the road, Amazon is going to leak in to the ad world of Facebook and Google and Instagram, and really not have nothing to do with products. I would not be surprised if somehow, some way that they start allowing maybe services and certain types of things on their website. I do think that's somewhere down the road. That's why we have an eye on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention Amazon Web Services, which is where they make a pretty decent chunk of their money, still pretty consistently making them $9 billion this quarter. So
Jeff Bezos is doing okay.
Certainly. Yeah. So we're going to move on to Spotify's earnings report. This is from William White on Markets Insider. Here are some of the key numbers. Spotify earnings per share are up 53.85% from 26 cents in the same period of the previous year. Revenue for the quarter is up 28% from $1.5 billion in the third quarter of 2018. And operating income increased to a profit from a loss during the same time last year. Net income of roughly $267.5 million is much better than the $47.72 million in Q3 2018, and monthly active users are 248 million, which is up 30% year over year. In addition, Spotify also included guidance for the fourth quarter. The company expects revenue for the period to range from $1.93 billion to $2.15 billion. And for comparison, Wall Street is looking for revenue of $2.08 billion during the quarter, and their stock went up. Wasn't a lot of information to find on the Spotify earnings report in general, but it sounds like they're doing pretty well, in particular year over year.
Yeah, their stock's pulled back recently, not dramatically. It's pulled back a little bit. If I kind of take a look, let me take a look at 1 month. It's pulled back a little bit, nothing dramatic. Spotify, as we all agree here, is something that firmly sits in the awareness stage. That's really where it does live. It is absolutely a viable investment vehicle for your advertising dollars.
Sorry, I was just so for the audience, when I put together these outlines, I pull from a lot of different sources, but sometimes it's nice to have something open on the computer in front of me for notes as well. And it looks like we have from Q3 to Q2, we have total monthly active users as 248, which is like a 16 million jump. Only about 5 million of that was from premium subscribers, and the amount of ad-supported monthly active users jumped what looks like 12 million, which is about a 29% increase.
Quarter over quarter change is 9% increase.
So we're looking at quite a jump from even just purely the ad-supported realm, which is where people are actually going to see your ads on Spotify, compared to the premium where you don't see them.
So they're hitting. I mean, they're clearly hitting. All the metrics you're looking for. I love that. Again, year-over-year growth is 30%. You just pulled up excellent numbers, which is up 12 million, which is 29% user growth. That's non-paid. There's a lot of people out there telling Spotify they should maybe get rid of their subscription model and just run ads. Just don't be as bad as the old school terrestrial radio. I don't know where that's going to end, but Spotify hits every single classic marker that you're looking for when you're thinking about advertising and where to allocate your dollars. What I like about Spotify right now is now you can geofence down to the zip code. It's a really, really affordable metric. And I think, they'll record the commercial for you for free?
At the moment, when you submit an ad to Spotify, I'm sure they will be changing this in the future, because I'm sure it cuts into costs significantly, but they will have people in-house or probably contracted, more likely, to read your spot and then send it back to you. So you don't even have to have somebody voice acting your spot. You can just send them the script, the kind of voice you're looking for, the kind of music you want underneath it, and they will package it together for you to advertise. And I think minimum spend is only, I think, like $250, something like that.
$500, I thought.
$500?
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So pretty cheap, all things considered, for advertising.
But here's where it hurts. So what I like about Spotify is great. I think their market share, we pulled their market share. It's dominant. It's really, really strong over Pandora, iHeartRadio, and all that. They're definitely breaking away from the pack. But the number one metric that they don't have is actual screen time with the eye. So that's something you want to kind of factor in, where everything in digital marketing truly is heavily predicated on what the individual can interact with on their eye, and then maybe touch with their fingers or clicking on the screen. While they can hear you, and that's great, it's going to be very difficult to prompt an individual to be at work or listening to a Spotify ad and for them to get up and go actually take an action on their phone or something, unless there's something like, use the code radio and get flowers, for mom on Mother's Day. So,
or they're spurred in that quick 15 or 30 seconds to open their phone and actually click
do
on
something
the ad,
now,
which I feel is unlikely.
Yeah, that stuff's kind of hard to come by. So, but with that all being said, it's absolutely a place you should be advertising in. I think we're still at 5%. Notice how heavy we are on the other platforms, and we're down these little spots. But it's something that you should be in the 5%. But when you kind of look at an algorithm on where all of my ad dollars should be weighted, if there's and again, our algorithms, I guess about 25 to 30 points. If there's one of the major points we have about 10 major points. If one of the points is always going to be consistently a 0, and then look, there's a little screen time, so I know you can look down at your phone. I know you can pull it up on your desk. And I know there's a little bit of screen time here, but it's really rare.
But it's one of those things where is it, from a screen time perspective, it is consistently, for reference, I have a radio background, so this is kind of how I think. Because a lot of radio advertising is, you're hitting people during times where they either can't pay attention, like they can't visually pay attention to something, so in your car, right? Or they're trying to focus on anything else, and there's the opportunity to hit them in, vulnerable is not the right word, but when they're not necessarily thinking about the other things in their life that are distracting them constantly, right? So you're hitting them in a time where they might be more susceptible, thank you, to your message. So I think, I don't disagree with you. The lack of screen time is obviously not good, but at the end of the day, they are an audio platform. So unless it's an audio platform,
yeah, but unfortunately, we're living in a screen time world.
That is true.
So I think that one of the reasons.
Well, then what about podcast advertising?
Which is true. Yeah, which is your true. So yeah, is this viable? Yeah. Should you be advertising in it? Yeah. Hopefully, this podcast is helping you gain a clearer picture that if you're allocating all of your money to Google, all of your money to Facebook, or I'm just going to do this, it can't just be I'm going to be. Let's come back to where we all are, the buyer's journey. Where is an individual across all the platforms? Stop looking at metrics like impressions and an ad frequency. That stuff's important, but you're better off letting your digital agency deal with those metrics. Start looking at it from an advertising standpoint. Where are the Wall Street ad dollars going? Where are the eyeballs at? Is the money constantly being thrown in these platforms? How long is it being thrown? How high is the revenue going up, the growth and so forth? And start thinking about advertising from that platform or from that kind of perspective. But again, we're all a fan of Spotify. We run Spotify ads here.
I pay for Spotify, surprisingly.
I do too. And I'm the kind of person I want to hear the ads, because
Yeah.
it's what we do. But I have found myself saying, is it worth it? But
They got me on that Christmas deal last year, like $1 for 2 months, and
that's not bad.
they got me for. I was pretty good, yeah.
But anyway, it's a tremendous platform that you should be roughly about 5% of your ad dollars in.
Yeah, it's something to think of. The only reason I brought up is because I'm from a radio perspective. So of course I think audio. I think like you can really engage people. But at the end of the day, you have to be realistic. It's not going to be for everybody. But I do think from what we've seen and from what I've heard from other people and other companies, there is some viability there. You just have to hit it at the right time with the right message, etc. All right, and now on to our final earnings report. This is for LinkedIn and Microsoft mostly, from Emil Prochalinsky on VentureBeat. So Microsoft reporting in earnings for its first fiscal quarter of 2020. That's how Microsoft does it. Q1 is technically Q3 2019, including revenue of $33.1 billion, a net income of $10.7 billion, and an earnings per share of and an earnings per share of $1.38, compared to the revenue of $29.1 billion, a net income of $8.8 billion, and earnings per share of $1.14 in Q1 2019. All three of the company's operating groups saw year-over-year growth. We're going to get specifically into some of the LinkedIn numbers. The problem with many of Microsoft's earnings reports is they don't tend to talk a lot about LinkedIn, even though obviously we care a lot about LinkedIn. So for productivity and business processes, that was up 13% to $11.1 billion. Office and commercial revenue grew 13%. Office consumer and cloud revenue was up 5%. Dynamics revenue increased 14%. LinkedIn revenue jumped a solid 25%. And Office 365 consumer subscribers hit 35.6 million. And that's basically all the information they're going to tell us about LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn has some stuff now. I have to dig into it deeper, but Jim was telling me there's the LinkedIn Partnership Network, which is opening up their advertising to certain things. I don't know if that's kind of a bridge into Bing, because we're not looking at any Bing type ads right here.
That is a good point.
There's no Bing.
Next quarter,
next
I
one
will
we'll take a look at
I'll bring
it.
in
But
Bing. Let me write that down.
That's the one I was kind of wondering. But I know that LinkedIn.
Maybe in another episode we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. Great. It's jumped a solid 25%, but I don't have enough data.
I forgot Bing existed.
Yeah.
I know that's bad of me, but I think I Google and I go, that's the search engine.
You'd be amazed, though. It's a default search engine for quite a bit. Again, if you're a B2B, you almost have to do LinkedIn. We like LinkedIn here. If you're B2C, we don't recommend it in any way, shape, or form. If you're B2B, it's a great spot to get your content out there. It's a great spot to target people you want to target. It's just the number one thing you have to look for in LinkedIn is actual screen time. I'm not even worried about users right now. It's really screen time. And I think their screen time is so-so. When the screen time historically is somebody that's strong, you have to wonder if that screen time is either a headhunter or an individual looking for a job. So the screen time numbers are severely skewed when you're trying to look at an overall picture for advertising. That's why, from a B2B standpoint, we like LinkedIn at 10 to 15%. It's expensive. Sometimes the message kind of falls flat. But it's something that, yes, if you're B2B, should you be advertising in it? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any final thoughts before we close out the show for today's earnings reports, Lauren?
No, I think that's it. I think we'll just jump into the next quarter.
Well, that's all for today's episode of The Buyer's Journey. Check us out on Comexis.com, YouTube, and anywhere you can get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter at @buyers_journey. Thanks for tuning in.